Okay, can we get started? So tonight to do our opening prayers, so everybody that has the 101 book, and I've sent it out to Thomas, you'll get it soon. Bhavani, you haven't recited these opening prayers for a while. Would you mind doing this?
Certainly. Are we ready?
Sure.
Altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me.
Everybody, please mute your microphones, please.
Obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang warche pedra, no parche pege, tarpa dang tam chaken pebar, du cho parche pa tam che ki so ji pe. Ma nam ka dang nam pe sem chen tam che de wa dak den. Juk nal dang drill nur du lana me pa yang dak par zo pe chang chup rin po she tu par je. Action Bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. De che du sang ma che ki bar du lu nagi sam ge hua la ko. Ma she bar du lu nag yi sam gi hua la ko. Du de ring ne sung te ni ma sa da sam ji bar du lu nagi sam gi hua la ko. Long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Drin Chin Sawa Dang Ju Parche Pe Held in Lama Dampa Nam La kab su chi o. Yidam kil kor chi la sok nam la kab su chi o. Sang che chum den di nam la kab su chi o. Dam pe cho nam la kab su chi o. Hak pe gen jung nam la kab su chi o. Ha wo kandro cho kang sung pe so yi shi ki chen dang den pa nam la kab su chi o. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Jang chub ning por chi ki bar sang che nam la kab su chi cho dang jang chub sem pa hi so la yang de chin kab su chi ji tar nang ji de cha ki jang chub tung ni ki pa dang jang chub sem pe la pa la de da grim shin ne pa tar de jin dro la pen dan du jang chub sem ni ki ji sing de jing du ni la pa la rim pa jin du la par ji o. Short refuge prayer. In Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sang che cho dang so ki cho nam la chang chu bar du dag ni kab su chi dag gi jin so ki pe so nam ki dro la pen chir sa chi drup par shog. The four immeasurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Ma nam ka dang nam pe sem chen. Tam che di wa dang de we ju dang. Den par jor chi. Duk nal dang duk nal chi ju dang. Tral war jor chi. Duk nal me pe de wa dang ni. Tral war jor chi. Ne ring chak dang ni dang. Tral hui tang nam la ne par jor chi. Is that it?
Okay, thank you all very much. So now we'll just have a quiet meditation for a few minutes. So you can watch your breath. So we've been over this a number of times. So you can sit in the 7-point posture of Varanchana. So you can recall those 7 points to yourself. If you're having trouble with that, jot it down and we'll go over it again. Same thing with the breathing exercise. Should be able to remember it. We've been over it a number of times. So if you have any trouble with it, jot it down, the trouble that you're having, but try and recall what it is that we discussed. It's in there someplace. So just kind of dig it out a little bit. So let's begin. We will we'll have a 5-minute meditation. Take a deep breath. Raise your arms up over your head as far as you can. Bring your hands together. Look up between your hands at the ceiling and stretch your back. Stretch your neck, stretch your arms. Don't hurt yourself. Exhale and relax your arms down by your side. Take a deep breath. Raise your arms again up above your head. Look up between your hands at the ceiling and stretch. Hold your breath. Exhale, relax your arms, bring back down to your sides. Inhale one last time, bring your arms up over your head again, stretch. Look up between your hands, hold your breath. Exhale, relax your arms. Open your eyes. Okay, very good. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the opening prayers or about the meditation that we just did? Short meditation? Or any other questions about anything that we've been talking about up to this time?
I have a question.
Okay.
You tell us it's important to say the prayers out loud.
Yes.
I've been wondering about that.
Okay.
So why does it make a difference to say them and not just think them?
Well, a number of reasons, not the least of which is that it becomes a function of our body, speech, and mind when we are reciting it out loud. If we're just reciting it to ourselves or we're just reading it ourselves, our body really isn't involved. Our brain might be involved, but our body's not involved. So by reciting it out loud, we're getting our lungs involved, we're getting our vocal cords involved, we're getting our body involved. We can feel the vibrations of those prayers. So the body and the speech, the intellect here come together. And as I've used the analogy many times, it's like a key that opens up the lock of our heart, of our spiritual center. So that's the major reason why we do it, is because we're involving our body, speech, and mind. A second reason is a more practical reason, is that we get very dull, or we can get very dull with these short, very powerful prayers when we just read them. But so if we are reciting them, it's charging us up a little bit more. So that's a practical reason why we do that. Just reading them, it just gets dull for us. So I think those are the two main reasons why we do that. The next question I would ask about that is, why do we recite them 3 times? Does anybody have an answer for that? Has anybody wondered that question?
Yes, there are reasons for that.
Yes, there is. So the first time we recite,
body, speech, and mind.
well, yes, and indirectly, yes. The first time we recite it, it's the outer meaning, just the general meaning of the words that we're reciting, and we can think about those words, and maybe we have some mental images of those particular words and so on. That's the first time we recite it, is the outer meaning. The second time we recite it is the inner meaning. So during the time that we've been learning about these prayers, and we've been going through them and talking about them, discussing them, and receiving instructions about what the meanings of these prayers are, what the meanings of each word is, each sentence, each phrase, and so on. So it's reciting the inner meaning. So there's a connection now between the outer meaning and the inner meaning, because the inner meaning can be quite different than what the outer meaning appears to be. And then the third time that we recite it is what we call the secret meaning. The secret meaning is the meaning that you have through your own experiences with these prayers. That as you do these more and more, and as they become more and more heartfelt, more and more thoughtful, more and more mindful, you begin to have your own experiences with them. Now, reciting them 3 times may be a very short limitation of what experience you might have. But if you take up the practice where you recite, say, one of these prayers for a week, you recite it a whole mile around. Not only will you memorize the prayer, but you'll begin to start having awareness of the inner meaning, and you'll start having awareness of your secret meaning, what this means to you. So this is the reason why we recite them 3 times. So whether we do them in English or we do them in the Sanskrit or the Tibetan is kind of secondary to those 2 reasons. Now, the reason why we do it in English is because that's our native language. That's how we know the meaning of these things. And so, but if we recite these in Tibetan or we recite these in Sanskrit, what we are doing is we are reciting with the vibrations of the Buddha and the great teachers that have come, because the Buddha taught in the Sanskrit language. The Tibetan language came out of the Sanskrit language. So it is charging it up with that vibration, that ancient sacred vibration. But it's also meeting the Lama halfway, because the Lama has gone through great work, great compassion, great hardship for him to learn our language. So we meet him halfway by trying to at least recite the prayers and the practices and so on in his language. So it has the other benefit of being charged with that vibration and so on. But one of the motivations is just out of respect for our teacher to meet him halfway. So, so those are the reasons why we recited the prayers 3 times. Does that make sense? Does that give you more motivation to want to do these prayers a little bit more mindfully? Because these are very powerful. Okay, remember, they're like keys that open up that spiritual lock. Anybody else got a comment or question?
I've got a question that kind of goes along with that. You're talking about being in the Sanskrit and what is it?
Tibetan.
Tibetan, yeah. You were talking about Sanskrit and the Tibetan. What kind of a time frame between the Buddha and now did the Tibetans get involved with the Sanskrit, or how did that work in together there?
Well, I'm not a scholar on this, so I can be way off, but I think it goes something like this. 2,600 years ago, Buddha Shakyamuni taught, and the language that he taught in at that time was the Sanskrit language. It wasn't a written language at that time. It was only a oral language. So for a couple of 100 years after he passed away, those teachings continued to be taught in the oral tradition of the Sanskrit. It wasn't until the Pali influence came from southern India, and this is where I get a little foggy. The Pali influence came in, and they had a language that they could write these things down. up until that time, the monastics were repeating these things over and over and over again, and they were correcting each other to make sure that they memorized it perfectly. So they had that memory of what the prayers were and what the practices were and so on. The Pali language, then they began to write it. So that stayed in India, maybe went down in the Southeast Asia. That part I'm a little shaky on. It wasn't until about 1,000 years later almost that the teachings went up into Tibet, up in the 8th century, 8th and 9th century, when they went up into Tibet. And at that time, Tibet had a rudimentary language, and many of the texts that were the Pali texts, or maybe they were written in Hindi, I can't say for sure, were translated into the Tibetan. So it wasn't until that time, until 8th century, 9th century, that they began to be translated into the Tibetan language. What has remained intact has been the sutras, or not the sutras, excuse me, the mantras, the actual mantras, the mantras being those recitations that we do when we do deity yoga, when we're visualizing the deity yoga. And so say, for instance, it's Shenreze, and his mantra is Om Mani Padme Hum Shri, Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. That is in Sanskrit. So those mantras have been preserved in the Sanskrit language. So when we're reciting those, we're reciting those as the same as the masters, the Buddha would have done 2,600 years ago. So I hope that explains it a little bit.
Lance, when you refer to reciting 3 times, the first time being for the outer meaning, and then the inner meaning, and then the secret meaning, do you attend to these 3 different meanings consciously, or does this just happen as a natural progression? Like it's automatic the first time through that I'm doing outer meaning, but then when I'm a second time through, I'm looking in more depth and I'm doing, or am I consciously saying this is the time for outer meaning, this is the time for inner meaning, and so on? How deliberate is that?
I think it's pretty deliberate in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be. We're developing a system, and it has to be broken down into its component parts until it becomes second nature to us. And then it flows very, very fluidly, very naturally, and so on. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, it's got to have strong motivation. It's got to have strong intention of what it is that we are doing. So, and I've been actually waiting for someone to ask these questions because we really haven't gone into the inner meanings for quite a while. And I've been waiting for somebody to ask, to take time and go through these prayers line by line, word by word, and discuss the inner meaning, discuss the outer meaning, and discuss the inner meaning, so that you can have your secret meaning, your own meaning over time. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Before we get involved with talking more tonight, I want to remind everybody this month is a very special month. It's the most holiest month of the year in the Buddhist calendar. And this month is the 4th month of the year, actually. And this month is called Saga Dawa. And this month is the time when Buddha Shakyamuni was born, when he attained enlightenment, and when he passed into parinirvana, when he dropped his body and was liberated. So these 3 dates are very, very important, as you can imagine. And so it's celebrated during this time of the year. So some people would, some of the Buddhist people would have celebrated it last week. Some people will celebrate it this coming week. This Wednesday is actually the full moon. So the full moon and the new moon in Tibet anyway are times when these kinds of things are really scheduled to happen, particularly the full moon, because all the power of the moon is present and so on. And the new moon, it's a time for new beginnings. So sometimes there are certain practices and ceremonies that are done then. But this particular practice, in the case of the Tibetan Buddhists, is done this Wednesday, the 26th. And it's going to be on Zoom. A number of teachers are giving their own ceremonies on this. So there's a number of Zoom things you can partake of. We're gonna follow the teachings of Khenpo Samdup, who is our spiritual director from Drikung Dharma Surya Center in Fairfax. He's going to be in Mexico, but he's going to be streaming all around the world his ceremonies. We'll be receiving those ceremonies through the computer, and we're going to be projecting them up on a 9-foot wide cinema screen in the shrine room. So it's a very good quality projector and so on. So if you would like to join us at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, you'll be most welcome for those that can. For those that can't and would like to be able to Zoom it at home, then I can give you the Zoom information. They didn't want to publish because they were concerned about people Zoom bombing, but I do have the information so you can get it if you ask for it. If you want to join us in the shrine room, it's an excellent opportunity for the people that live around Northern Virginia, Maryland, who haven't been to the center or who have been there and haven't been there for a while and would like to come back. This is a great time to do that. It'd be very auspicious to do that at this time. So we'll have some books that are going to be available for people. If you're going to come, let me know so I can make sure that I have books for you, because I have to print them and they're big books. So, but I'll be glad to do that. So I'll be going down tomorrow to do that work. And then Wednesday we start with all day practice. It'll start at, like I said, 10 o'clock and go till about 5. No. It goes till 6:30. And then at 6:30, 7 o'clock, then the Tibetan community, the Tibetan people are coming in to do their prayers in Tibetan. And so there'll be 40, 50, 60, 80 people there, Tibetan people. So if you want to experience that, which I strongly recommend, you will really enjoy it. And the people are wonderful people, and the enthusiasm, you will understand the meaning of doing these things out loud when you are with these people. You will understand what the culture of Buddhism is all about when you're with Buddhists who were born into Buddhism and brought it over from the old country with them and so on. And you'll see the beauty of it, the power of it, and so on. So I invite everybody to come. I'll be there all day. I'm not going to leave until Thursday. So it'd be great to meet you in person. It'd be great to see everybody. So please come if you can. Even if it's for just a little while.
Lance,
Yes.
can this be picked up afterwards on YouTube? Because we've been invited to the Sri Lankan temple Wednesday night for their celebration.
I think so, but I can't guarantee it because it's up to the people who are sponsoring this. But in the past they have, so I don't see why not. You know, I know it's coming to some people. It's coming by way of YouTube, so inherently there it's getting recorded onto YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
If you have any trouble getting it, then let me know and I'll see what I can do to find out for you.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to see it, but it was such an honor to be invited to this,
Yeah.
to the Sri Lankan temple, that we are doing that.
And I sent everybody a flyer. If you didn't
Yeah.
see it in your email or in WhatsApp, I sent it to you a couple different times to remind you, you know, so it'll be a wonderful experience. Open yourself up to these things. Any comment, question? Okay. All right, so then we get back to the book, The Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So now we've gone through the first 3 parts, believe it or not, and we're on to part 4. And this part 4 is labeled as the method, how it is that we attain enlightenment, how it is that we attain liberation. We've been talking about what it is, what liberation is, in terms of the Buddha nature, the primary cause. That was chapter 1 when we talked about that. And then we talked about how it is that we recognize that within ourselves. You know, if it's here, what does that mean? So we talked about in chapter 2 that we have this precious human life, and this precious human life is our working basis to realize our true Buddha nature. So we talked about that. And then we talked about in chapter 3, we talked about the contributory cause to help us to do that, to be able to realize our true nature by way of the spiritual master, the teachers, the guru.
Voice.
Yes.
So they're opening up the temple actually next week.
I beg your pardon? Zara, are you talking to me, or is your microphone just on and you need to turn it off? Okay. I'm sorry, you're breaking up. All right, Zara, you're not coming through.
What page are we on?
We're on page 7 of the outline that we have, is what we're on now. So I was just finishing up the introduction to this and just saying that chapter 3 was a contributory cause, the spiritual master who helps us, because if we're left to our own devices, we're bound to go off in all kinds of directions, misdirections, confusions, and so on. So the spiritual master is there for us to keep us guided. It's like every time we fall off the tracks, the spiritual master is there to pick us up and put the locomotive back on the tracks for us to get to liberation, to get to enlightenment, if we're unable to do it for ourselves. So now we're coming to the next part, which is the method, which is the spiritual master's instructions. Now, what are the spiritual master's instructions? Okay. So what this is we're learning what the antidote to attachment to this life. So over the classes that we've had, one of the questions that's come up repeatedly is, well, look, you know, we have our family, we've got our friends, we've got our jobs and so on, but isn't that attachment? Isn't that desire? And why shouldn't I, you know, have a connection with my family and my friends and my work and so on like that? I need to do that. It's there's a practical reason to do that. And it's true. But we have to have an antidote to the attachment of that, to the negative attachment of that, to the point where it becomes to overwhelm us and we lose sight, we lose track of who we are and what it is that we're trying to do, not just for ourselves, but for all beings to attain enlightenment, to be liberated from this ocean of suffering that we're all in. So that includes our family, includes our friends, includes our co-workers and all beings and so on that we encounter. So being able to liberate ourselves is what we're trying to do. So this attachment keeps pulling us back. So now understanding what impermanence is becomes the antidote to that attachment, that we see that everything is by nature impermanent. We give it our misconception that things are permanent. We misconceive things. We don't see things in their impermanence. We don't want to, as a matter of fact. Our ego is protecting us from that. We want to live forever. But as we get older, the older we get, the closer the inevitable time of our passing comes. And for healthy beings, you know, we're begin to accept that, although we do have fear about what that means, but some people are just terribly afraid of it. And some people may be 60, 70, 80, 90 years old and still holding on to life. Oh, why do I got to die? I'm 90 years old. I want to live to be 100. I want to live to be 110. I don't ever want to die. So I'm sure you've heard it in your families or your friends, or maybe you think it yourselves. But the reality is that this life, this samsara, is all temporary. Everything is changing. It may move so slowly that it doesn't appear to be. Just like the earth is rotating so fast around its own axis, and it's revolving around the sun and the solar system in such a way that we don't recognize it. We don't perceive it. We don't feel it. It just seems like we're just here all the time. But the reality is that it is moving very, very quickly. And if it weren't, we'd probably fall off. So there is a practical reason why it happens, because of the laws of physics and so on, which are all laws of phenomenal nature. And they're all true to a point. So just to, the scientists are all struggling for the singularity, this equation, or this truth that says, here's where all these things all fit together. This theory of relativity that Einstein developed, E = mc squared. That the scientists are realizing that these things only work in certain situations. And that when they get into these black holes and these scientific phenomena, that things begin, the physics, known physics begins to fall apart. And they're looking for this singularity. In Buddhism, we say there is no singularity in this phenomenal world. There's two truths. There's the relative and there's the absolute. So we've talked a little bit about that. We'll talk more about that later. But the point is that the singularity is not something that is going to be discovered by human beings. Only in their spirituality, only within their spirituality can they approach that. And even that has to be experienced. We can't know it with our brain, because our brain, our body is all temporary. It's all part of this phenomenal nature, this impermanent phenomenal nature. So therefore, inherently, it's incapable of being able to recognize that which is beyond itself. So understanding this all falls under this idea, this concept of impermanence. So here in this outline, or you can follow in the book, in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, it says, what are the 4 obstacles to this attainment of Buddhahood? This attainment of Buddhahood is this liberation from this suffering, from this impermanence, from samsara. So it says, number 1, being attached to life's activities. Number 2 is being attached to the pleasures of samsara. Number 3 is being attached to peace. And number 4 is not understanding the method by which enlightenment is achieved. So these are the 4 obstacles of what it is that prevents us from understanding that we're attached to our life's activities in the first place. We don't want to see anything beyond that. We don't want to let go of this. We're too attached to the pleasures of samsara. We like waking up in the morning. We like hearing the birds. We like seeing the blue sky and the sun. And we like seeing the moon at night and so on. And we like seeing our relatives and so on. We like all these pleasures that we have in samsara. We attach to these. We hold on to these. And we're willing to pay some kind of a price for these things, because the price that we're paying is the suffering of all these things changing, all these things going away, and so on. So we accept that in this lifetime, theoretically, But when it happens to us, it's crushing. When someone passes away that's very, very close to us, it's absolutely crushing. How am I going to go through my life without my mother? How am I going to go through life without my father or my son or my daughter or my husband or my wife or my friend or whatever? And then slowly you begin to heal and you find that you can manage, you can heal the wound of losing somebody like that. So whether it's someone's passing away or someone gets divorced or, all the different things that happen in this life, we're attached to these pleasures. We want these pleasures. So these are the very things that keep us from being able to recognize this impermanence. We think it's all permanent. So then being attached to peace, this one's very subtle. Those of us who have gotten to a point of being able to say, oh, this world is so crazy. My goodness, there's such a divide in the world today. And I've said this many times in these groups and everything. And wouldn't it be great if we all were the same? Wouldn't it be great if we all think the same? Wouldn't it be peaceful if we all were Buddhists and we all treated everybody the same and all life the same and the earth the same and so on? And wouldn't that be great? And let's work for that. Let's really make that happen. And then as we do that, we begin to develop the attachment to peace. Because where that is a problem is this phenomenal nature that we are part of. The nature of this phenomenal nature is chaos, is the phenomena itself. If you look out into space, and now we've got these giant eyes to be able to help us to do that, it's chaos out there. It is such a violent place. Galaxies are colliding with each other, planets are colliding with each other. There's all kinds of death rays out there, gamma rays and beta rays and zeta rays, all this kind of stuff is all out there that we would die in an instant if we were out there without some kind of protection. So it's a very violent place, and we have very little ability to be able to do anything about it. It is like the ceaseless wheel that is turning. And we are part of that wheel at this level, in these 3 dimensions. We perceive, we understand, we experience that wheel. Yes, Gary.
Lance, that doesn't mean that we should be indifferent to suffering, does it?
Of course not.
What about people who spend their lives, or at least part of their time, feeding the poor, working to alleviate suffering? Is it a waste of time? Because there will always be poor, there will always be hungry. We will never really wipe it out. In fact, it seems to be getting worse. Should we just stop and meditate, or should we be active? Where do we find our place in all this chaos that you've described?
Understood. And it's all relative. This is the relative phenomenon, so it's all relative. We do what we can with what we got. Some of us, I'm talking broadly about, humankind, some of us only have the ability to be able to share physical things. That's all we have, because they haven't developed anything beyond that. Now, they may have some really good riches. They may have some really good wealth to be able to share, but that's their limit. They haven't exposed themselves. They haven't opened themselves up to something greater than that. Then there are those who are spiritualists who then understand the physical aspects of things and understand the intellectual aspect of things, but also understand the spiritual aspects of things. But those spiritualists are sharing with people in a spiritual way that you could argue, because you can't weigh it, you can't measure it. So I know the argument. that we're doing something for the benefit of other beings and so on. We're trying to help, grow awareness in other people's minds at a more fundamental way, in a spiritual way. And then there's all these myriad levels in between. So it's all where we fit into that. Everybody fits in their own place. So there's not there's many long answers to that question, but really that's the short answer. It's relative, and people do what they can with what they got. And it depends on, are they physical beings? Are they physical intellectual beings? Are they spiritual beings? What gifts do they have to share? And we do what we can. So I was talking about peace and the attachment to peace, because we want to make a difference. We want the samsara to end. We want the suffering to end. And, it's like trying to say, let's make the color red stop. Now think about this. If you're any degree of a scientist, if you understand anything about color and vibrations and sound and so on, things are vibrating all this time around us. And when things become so intense that they vibrate with such power and such frequency that they suddenly become sounds. And then when they vibrate even stronger than that, and even more intense than that, and more higher frequency than that, then those sounds then become light. And then that light then maybe starts off as white light, but then it becomes, at some point, it becomes red light, just like it becomes blue light, just becomes yellow light, green light, and so on. So trying to stop that light from happening is a fool's folly. It's part of this nature, and it's part of the nature that we really don't understand. We don't have the ability to understand. We've learned how to live with it to some degree, but we really can't control it. We can control our immediate environment, is all that we really can do. But trying to stop this suffering is like trying to stop the color red or some other simile like that. What we can do, though, is we can liberate ourselves from these three spheres, from these three dimensions, from this ocean of samsara. We're seeing everything from a particular point of view that recognizes all this stuff. And now we're opening it up, that we recognize it from a spiritual point of view, and we can understand this suffering and the causes of suffering. But we also can understand that there is this liberation that we can transcend to something that is beyond that color red, something that is beyond that sound, something that is beyond all the confusion and so on. We experience that through our meditations. When we harness all our physical energy, we harness all our intellectual energy, all gets harnessed, and this spirituality opens up. And then we have this experience of this spirituality. Now, we can argue it, we can talk about it, because you can't measure it and you can't weigh it and so on. So a lot of people say, oh, that doesn't exist. You're crazy. You're chasing a dream or something like that. And that's fair for conversation. We can have a debate about that sometime. But this is what we're talking about, is the spirituality now, what this is. So if we're chasing the peace in this three-dimensional world, that's, like I said, a fool's folly. But if we can liberate ourselves from it and go to the fourth dimension, or the fifth dimension, or the sixth dimension, or maybe the 16th dimension, however many, look at an experience from a different point of view. then everything is beyond our comprehension. And that's what we can do. Not as human beings, we get glimpses of it as human beings, but to become the embodiment of it is to become the embodiment of the spirituality. And then we talk about, we've reached what is sometimes called the clear light. Sometimes is called the pristine cognition. Sometimes called the Mahamudra, or sometimes the Dzogchen. There's many different names for it. The Rigpa, there's many different names for it. So for us here on Earth, here in this planet, here on this samsara, we have these three dimensions to look at, to deal with and everything. So we have to recognize this impermanence and accept this impermanence. So I think somebody had something to say. Thomas, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, the thing that's been in my mind for quite a long time is that you hear the various words of Dharma, and over time, it's you can let go of some attachment, become more generous, kinder and more compassionate. So you can do that in your everyday life. But the ordained seem to say that you want to go beyond that. And we're stuck here in this everyday life. So if what the real advice was to go off and live in a cave and isolate ourselves and just do meditation, then that might be a solution. But that doesn't seem to be the solution for 7 billion people.
Well, that's correct. But let's put that into perspective. As you said, a number of things there that are provocative. Number one, being ordained is not a requirement for spirituality. Being ordained does not mean that you have all of a sudden this ability to recognize things that an ordinary person can't recognize.
No, I got that.
You know, so the part of being ordained is another relative part of the equation, and it's a lifestyle as much as anything else. The point of going off and going into retreat, you know, whether it's a month or whether it's a week or whether it's a lifetime or anything in between, is a means to be able to concentrate your mindfulness on liberation. Now, some people can attain that in a month. Some people may not attain it in a whole lifetime, or 2 lifetimes, or 3 lifetimes. It's relative to those individuals. You know, so what the retreat is, whether it's a month or whether it's a lifetime, is having the cessation of involving yourself with society and just concentrating on one-pointed mindfulness, to be able to understand what liberation is, and then to become the embodiment of that liberation. So
I guess rephrasing what my concern is, I find it very difficult to conceive of being liberated while living in this world.
it's very difficult. It's the most, meditating, getting to that point is the most difficult thing that a human being can do. And everybody that has tried that has always said that. Not the least of which is Milarepa and the Buddha and Marpa and Jigdan Sumgun and all the masters that, you know, I've been exposed to and are available for us to be able to read and so on. Yeah, it's very, very, very difficult. But at the same time, how many beings have been able to attain that? And what differences are being made? You know, it starts getting into a philosophical question about, has things improved in the world, in mankind's world, since, say, the time of the Buddha, 2,600 years ago? Have things improved? Have things changed? I think it's a good discussion to have. You know, from my point of view, and it's a limited point of view, I agree, and I'm willing to talk about it with anybody who wants to take another side about it. But it seems to me that we're getting rid of so many things, so many bad things, so many hatreds, and so many prejudices, and so on. There's still a lot of work to do. There are still a lot of people who haven't even fathomed that those things exist because they're so involved in the hatred and so involved in the prejudice. They don't even see it, you know. But there are more and more and more people who are reaching critical mass that are evolving. Things have changed.
Or changing.
Well, things have already changed and things continue to change. I mean, that's the nature of samsara, is change. So how many people do you think have been on the planet? Right now, there's 7.5 billion. How many gazillions do you think have been here? You know, and some have been liberated. Some have been liberated, but are here in spirit to be able to help guide all those others and so on. So it's a very philosophic, spiritual question, you know, to talk about. And you can't weigh it, you can't measure it. So I hope that lends a little bit to the question you were bringing up.
Thank you for your comments.
Right. So this piece, you know, this piece is very elusive. I keep coming back to it because it's so elusive. Why wouldn't we want peace? And we want peace, but we also have to know that peace is not possible to change all of samsara, because that's what this is. You know, it's like, you know, another way, samsara is composed of what? Of the 6 human realms. And what are the 6 human realms? The God realm, the jealous God realm, the human realm, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realms is all part of samsara, all part of the ocean of suffering. So for us to be able to stop that and save that is a folly. You know, we talk about in our prayers that until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I will continue to look at the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. They become my refuge until the end of samsara. The end of samsara for everybody, or the end of samsara for myself and anybody else who wants to end their samsara. So we have to look at it from that perspective. So then this 4th point here is not understanding the method by which enlightenment is achieved. So what is this method of enlightenment? And we see that what it is a process. It's not a light switch that we flip up. It is a process. It's a process of recognition. It's a process of responsibility. It's a process of application, antidotes. It's a process of purification. It's a process of stabilization. It's all these things that are all entwined with each other, and they get simpler and simpler and purer as we get to the top. So the visual simile, the analogy that we always use is a spiral. In the beginning, we're on this very wide circular motion that we're going through. And all these problems come up and we have to solve all these problems. And as we begin to solve them, they get a little bit fewer, and we move up the spiral, and the spiral gets a little smaller and tighter. And then that gets a little bit more purified, and we get to the next level. And then we get to the next level and next level and next level and so on like that, until we get to the very pinnacle of that spiral. And there is where the Buddhahood lies, where the Buddhahood is, where that awakening is. You know, let's not call it Buddhahood for a moment, because that anthropomorphizes it, you know, and gives it a connotation that there's this savior there or something like that. You know, it's our awareness that we get to, the pure awareness that we get to, and then it becomes so pure that it is uncontaminated and unstained. And then now all of this that was the ocean of suffering now becomes a field of reality where there is no suffering.
Is the concept of enlightenment a something an individual aspires to and achieves, or is it more than that? Is it something humanity as a whole aspires to?
It is something that we already have,
Right.
but we don't accept. We won't open up to it. It's blocked up.
Too much stuff in the way.
What's that?
Too much stuff in the way.
Too much stuff in the way. It's already here.
Yeah.
It's already here. So the Buddha found a way to find that enlightenment, to find that liberation. But he's not the only one. You know, Jesus found a way, Moses found a way, you know, Muhammad found a way. There's many other great leaders, avatars, whatever, that found found a way to do this. You know, Buddha is one of them. And, you know, one of the benefits of the Buddha is it's very well documented. And it's been followed by many people and so on. It's very well articulated.
But is the emphasis on individuals finding the way, or is it also on humanity as a whole finding the
Both
way?
at the same time.
Okay.
Both at the same time. It's part of our dualistic nature. You know, that's part of the thing that we have to transcend. That we, in enlightenment, upon enlightenment, they become one and the same.
Okay.
So if you're helping others, you're helping yourself. If you're helping yourself, you are helping others. Or we should say maybe we're affecting others, you know, so because that could be good or bad. So now the next question is, how can these four obstacles be dispelled? The spiritual master's instructions are on the meditation on impermanence. That which we are holding on to is an intellectual idea, a concept, permanence, impermanence. We're holding on to that. So we need to be able to meditate on that, to be able to let that go, to meditation on the faults of samsara and the cause and result of samsara, to understand what this phenomenal nature is, these three spheres that we see, these three times that we are all part of, to be able to recognize that and to understand those faults of that and see that they are impermanent. Why are we holding on to these things? And then the meditation on loving kindness and compassion. What does loving kindness and compassion mean? Loving kindness is the essence of loving kindness is wisdom. And the essence of compassion is skillful means, is method, being able to actualize that wisdom. So being able to meditate on that. And then meditation on the various elements of the cultivation of bodhicitta. The various elements of the bodhicitta. So the bodhicitta, we've talked about our loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So that we have to conceptualize, understand, see within ourselves, but then we have to see all the interruptions. We have to see all the interacting things that are dynamics that are causing, that have the potential to cause that bodhicitta to become blocked up again instead of keeping it open. So we have to see what closes it. We have to see what opens it and become masters of that. So these are the spiritual master's instructions to be able to see these things. These things are very abstract. And it really requires deep concentration, deep contemplation, and deep meditation with guidance, because it's very easy to get sidetracked. It's very easy to get lost in this. So if anybody has ever studied anything about, in school, philosophy and so on, I mean, my God, it's like going down a rabbit hole is one expression. Another expression is a Rube Goldberg, affair, of things, traps and doors and ladders and all this kind of stuff. There's all these kinds of things because this is all the mind of human beings. So what we have to do is to penetrate the mind of human beings in order to liberate it. So this system gives us a technique to be able to do that. Gives us a way to be able to do that. You could follow somebody else's. But this is the one that we're talking about tonight. This is the one that we use for reasons that we've already talked about because of its articulation. And the more and more that we get into it, the more and more we find that, yeah, this really seems to be true. And if you see most of the people that are exploring this are middle-aged people or senior citizens, because they've gone through so many other things that they've exhausted already. And now they're getting down to it. Oh, I only got 20 years left to live, or something like that. I better get my act together and find out what's really going on, what this spirituality stuff is about. I didn't find all that happiness that I wanted in my physicality, in my body, or in my possessions. I didn't find it in my job and in the work that I did. I didn't find it wasn't completely there. Parts of it were there, but it wasn't completely there. Maybe there's something else completely that I can change with in spirituality, that I can really begin to see, that I can transcend this and be able to see from another point of view. Does this make sense? Anybody want to take the other side of that?
Well, the older person, the middle-aged and older cohort, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So what about the young person? You ever meet somebody wise before, but beyond their years?
Not many.
Well, what about the Buddha himself? What about Jesus? What about Gandhi?
But they were in their 30s.
What's that?
I don't know how old Gandhi was, but Jesus and Buddha were in their 30s.
Well, that's right. And that's my point. They weren't 70 or 80. And so the point is that what we are seeing, when we see that, when we call that out, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. We're seeing the tip of that spiral. We don't see all the stuff that went below, all the purification that went below, all the stuff that took lifetimes to be able to get to have the life force, to be born with that life force as a human being that has so much purification already, and all it needs is just the spark. All it needs is just a few things to purify, and then it's just unleashed. And then for the next 50 years, the Buddha continued to teach. For 2,000 years, Jesus has been teaching. For 5,000 years, the Jews have been teaching. And excuse me if I get that wrong, but you get my point. And the essence of everything that I just mentioned, the essence is the same as bodhicitta. Somebody was going to say something.
I have a quick question, Lance.
Okay.
You might have mentioned this another time, but how do beings in other realms get purified? I'm talking about, animals, for example, that have.
Excellent question. And are you part of the Bardo Total?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to get to that question. But the short answer of it is that there are there's 6 realms that I talked about in samsara. And these 6 realms are the psychophysical drama of being a human being. And the animal realm is included in that. And for each one of those realms, there is a Buddha that is specifically working, for lack of a better word, to help liberate, to offer assistance to all those beings. Specifically in the animal kingdom, the animals are ignorant. Their base problem is their ignorance. They are incapable of understanding. They are capable of changing their environment. They're incapable of being human beings. They have maybe some abilities, but they're not human beings. So what the Buddha, who is acting or who is offering help to those animals, is offering education. So the answer to your question is, how do these animals become higher is through education, through being able to recognize something within themselves and being able to change that spirituality within them, because they have that spiritual nature within them also. And that's a basic part of Buddhism, that it's not just limited to human beings, it is all sentient beings.
Something that I do when neighborhood cats and dogs wander into my yard, if they're still for a moment, not if they're running through, oftentimes I'll say a mantra to them. Maybe
So what? Say that again. I didn't hear that.
And I'll say, "Oh, money, pay me home,"
Oh, yeah.
or some other mantra.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd say long life, and then I think, well, I don't know that they want to live a long life as a cat or a dog, so I don't say that so often. But the old money, I say that quite a bit.
That's excellent. You can't do anything better than that. That's exactly right. Om Mani Padme Hum.
Even to the salamanders.
I was out liberating some cicadas yesterday. and they quiet right down, they start humming with me. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Try it.
So Lance, do people that embrace Buddhism should be compassionate towards all animals?
Sure.
I
Somebody was saying something?
That was Aiden. That was.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
Aiden, excuse me, Adrian, did that answer the question then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see, we're all interconnected. And when we say mother sentient beings, we're not kidding. You know, that we're seeing all these beings. I mean, you know, our mother may be our cat because there was something in your mother's life and our mother's life that we don't recognize, that when the karmic seeds were right, she was born and she wasn't able to be born as a human being. She was born as a cat, but she happened to be your cat for a period of time. Oh, to get that literal, you know, can really get, you know, quite fanciful, but there is a point to be made there. And if we look at everybody, everything as part of us, as our mother, that we're all coming from the same material, then there is this inescapable recognition of sameness, of equanimity.
I don't know if I should ask this question. It might be offensive to some here, but in that sense, should we refrain from eating meat?
No?
So the suffering of animals definitely is there when they're being slaughtered. And if you have like different ways of nourishing your body, should we choose like less harmful ways of doing that?
Well, let me ask a couple practical questions. And, you know, it's an interesting question. It's something we could talk a lot about. I'm sure everybody here has an opinion about this and everything. But maybe we should just go ahead and pull our molars out and then pull out our incisors and so on, and all the teeth that we use to masticate meat. We are meat eaters by nature. We are animals. And we have all the tools to be able to digest meat. And many of us, when we get sick and we go to the doctor, and if the doctor is a good doctor and is trying to understand us from a holistic point of view, is asking us, what do you eat? And finds out that, oh, I'm just eating fruit and nuts and I'm just eating veggies and stuff like that. And he said, well, no wonder you're anemic. You need more protein. You need that strong protein that comes from meat. You got to start eating meat. And then, like a miracle cure, within a short time, the health of that person can return. Now, I'm not saying that happens all the time and so on, but in many people, that is the thing, you know, that they need to have more high quality protein that only comes from meat products like that. So you could say maybe that's a rationalization, but there it is, you know. So if you make a conscious decision to not eat meat, to be or to take it one step further to become a vegan, not just a vegetarian, but a vegan, you know, okay, you know, but how much time, how much attachment do you have to your diet?
Just as much as to any other thing that I do every day?
Well, it's your balance. Everybody has their own balance. I'm just pointing it out, and I'm just asking that question. So there's not a universal answer to it. The Buddhists don't have, you know, it's the Indian Buddhists that would say that, you know, the Buddhists in India, you know, would be vegetarians. The ones in Tibet are meat eaters out of practicality, because they don't have the land to be able to grow all the things that they need to eat.
The Dalai Lama is supposed to have stopped eating meat.
Maybe so. I can tell you 4 or 5 that started eating meat. So I look at it as a personal thing, you know, and fundamentally, it's what we do through liberation. How cognizant are we about liberation? Thomas was saying that when the dogs and cats come into his yard, he talks to them by saying, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum is the liberation mantra. So if you were going to be the one who is going to take down an animal to eat it, then you should be doing it with loving kindness, bodhicitta, and reciting prayers, reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, liberating that being and saying, we are going to take you in and you are going to feed us and we are going to respect you. This is a way of that Buddha being able to show that animal a way out of being an animal. You're going to be part of a human being. When we're driving down the road and those bugs are smashing across our windshield, we should be going, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. When you're walking across the lawn and you're squishing down on the bugs that are in the lawn and everything, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. There's all kinds of things in the atmosphere right here, all between us. We don't see them, they're invisible. But we're taking them in, we're digesting them, we're breathing them, you know. They are sustaining us in many ways. So our whole life should be a liberation mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. This is what we're trying to get to. This is the spiral. This is the tip of the spiral. This is what we're trying to get to. This is what I'm talking about. That everything we do with our body, speech, and mind becomes bodhicitta.
You're not eating the cicadas, are you, Lance? Is that what you're telling us?
Not now, but if I had to, maybe I would, you know.
The weatherman did tonight.
I've done worse, you know.
They actually prepared them. I had decided to skip the weather.
Did he take the wings off?
Let's.
Don't eat them if you're allergic to shellfish.
Oh, is that right?
Mhm.
A crustacean?
They're related enough that you could also have an allergic reaction.
Ah, okay.
Fear not, Rebecca. I will eat no cicadas. Oh, glad when you're gone.
So anyway, it's a very provocative topic to talk about. And like I said, everybody's going to have a different, you know, comment about it and so on. And they're all valid, you know, and but it's an individual choice. It's been a conversation that we've had, you know, in the Dharma centers many times. Okay, so we have to continue to penetrate this meditation on impermanence. Ed, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, just listening to your explaining, you know, that by killing an animal for meat, that I don't know how you put it, but we're helping him escape his limitations of animalhood or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying that well, but it just sounds like a rationalization.
Of course it does. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Have you ever been on a farm? Have you grown up on a farm or been on a farm? And when
I've been on a farm, yeah, not grown up on.
I mean, have you been there when they slaughter the pigs or they slaughter the cows or they slaughter the roosters or the chickens or whatever?
I've never witnessed
you know, and you know, I can't say I've witnessed it firsthand, but I've seen it. I've seen it on film and stuff like that. And I remember one thing I was really struck with, that there was this woman who had a farm, and she was taking down a sheep. And the sheep she brought over to her lap, and it was a process. It took, I don't know, a half an hour or something like that. Maybe it was 15 minutes. I don't know how long it was. But she's talking to the sheep and she's patting the sheep and everything. And then she just took this razor sharp knife and just slit its throat, and it poured its blood into a bucket and so on. And she's talking to the sheep the whole time.
The sheep are very docile when you slaughter them. It's not the same thing with all the animals. I grew up on a farm with my grandmother, and under the communist regime, you were not supposed to have any animals. They were all taken. So people were hiding them in barns and then slaughtered them. So my uncle, he was the one to take him down. And he was a pretty, a little bit rough around the edges. But he used to take his big axe and hit them right in the head until they would die. And then he told us a story about a pig that was slaughtered. It was, they were stabbing him right in the heart. Apparently the person missed that, but the pig lost a lot of blood, and they started already putting the hay on it and lighting on fire. And then when the heat got to it, the pig just woke up, still had life in it, started running around. It was a little bit of a nightmare. So I've seen all of that. And I mean, basically I grew up eating meat. And later on in life, I switched to eating plants because eating meat was not doing well with me. So I almost didn't make it because I had perforated ulcer and I had surgery when I was in college. And then I gradually switched to plant-based diet. And that works with me very well. So I don't know, just for some reason, you know, I'm just looking at all these things in a different perspective now. And coming to the States where, you know, there are a lot of alternatives to meat, so you can sustain yourself eating other, you know, other things. So that's basically why, you know, it's just going down that path and asking that question. But
Okay.
I kept chickens and ducks and turkeys, and I've butchered quite a few of them over time, and I've had some pretty serious thought over it. First thought is there's an art to kindness and killing. If you're you know, if you've got to kill for nutrition. And my second thought evolved in my Buddhism. I think there has to be as many experiences and interactions, karmic interactions with our lives and other lives being snuffed out by our influence, as there are experiences of our connection with lives that are flourishing and that are coming in to bodies. So I just think there's some balance there. We can't draw a line and say that I don't eat meat and I don't kill animals, or I kill animals with kindness. We can't help it. We're all connected. We're, you know, to be a member in a society where this sort of, you can consider it barbarism, but where this barbarism takes place means that we're implicated. And whether it's me or my neighbor, it's opportunities. It's either we are implicated in the death of others and or implicated in the life of others. And I think it's all of the above.
You have to go up.
And chickens aren't very docile when you want to kill them.
No, they're pretty floppy.
We used to live catty corner to the shop that was selling the baking hens and things like that. And they would take them and they would grab them by the feet, slit their neck and throw them in a 55-gallon drum and let them run themselves out. And if you went up to the Chicago Exchange up there and watched some of the slaughter that's went on up there, they basically shot the animals and put them off to the side. Now, the Jewish people had a little different method. They bled the animals and they did prayers over the animals. I don't know what the prayers necessarily did or anything to them, but the bleeding of it got the system cleaned out of all the natural tissues and things like that, and they were a little more. How would you put it? They're a little more humane to the critters than what the Chicago Exchange is.
William, if I may, the kosher method of slaughter involves using an absolutely razor sharp knife and hitting a nerve cluster so that the animal loses consciousness immediately.
Right.
So it's not just that they bleed out, right? They are unconscious before they bleed out. And it is, if you're going to slaughter animals, it is thought to be one of the kindest, most humane ways to kill. And so as someone who chose to be Jewish, one of the draws that I had was the relationship that Jews have with food and with the animals that they eat. And the prayers that you're referencing are prayers of appreciation for the life that was lost in order to sustain our life. And so it at every step in the food chain, it's kind of Jewish food, you are acknowledging the sacrifice that was made for you to be able to eat. And so I kept kosher for a number of years, largely because of that. I wanted every time I ate to be mindful of the fact that a life was given in order that I might eat, and that I knew it had been done humanely. And I have toyed with going further toward vegetarianism, but it doesn't work for me. And it's interesting, Adrian, I was hospitalized with perforated ulcers when I was in college and almost died. So we have that in common.
And the
for
Native
me,
American,
a diet without meat protein doesn't work. I become unhealthy.
the Native Americans do the same process, basically the same process. They pray to the animal before they take the animal. They pray to the animal after they do the animal for being a food source. Now, the Buddha gave instructions, and his instructions were that when you go out and you beg for your food, you take anything that you want.
You take anything they give you.
Not anything you want, anything that's given to you, you take. With a caveat, and the caveat was that you don't have somebody fix you steaks because you want steaks, or you don't have somebody to fix you a special cut of meat because of that. You weren't to be involved in any sort of killing of an animal. And that included, I want a piece of meat. Joe, will you go over there and slaughter that pig so that I could have that piece of meat? That is not allowed. You have to accept what's given to you, and you can't qualify what you want. Now, the full thing is, the Buddha said that the vegetarian things were better for you than the not vegetarian things. But you were allowed to take that because of the fact it was given to you. He a lot of his talks and speeches were around the fact that you do no harm, and the animals were considered to be of the same quality and stature of souls or whatever as humans did. Is my understanding of all of the writings that I've seen. I don't know. I don't say, be a vegetarian. Although if you study some of the things that they show you now about the fact that the cows produce so much methane and yada, 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 it would probably be better to have a world without cows. And you can get more protein. You can get more protein in vegetables than you can with the best cut of beef that you could have.
Okay, well, let's move on. There is one thing I want to draw your attention to, and that is on page 13 of the prayer book that we have, is the food offering prayer.
Lance, this is Grant. I thought there was something on like right livelihood that said something about like sellers of meat or something like that. Like that was not considered a proper job. I don't know. Do you know anything about what the Buddha said about livelihood, and if it said anything about meat selling.
Well, no, not specifically. You know, there are cultural questions about this, practical questions about this, and they all have something to do about all of this. And this all goes to the question that we're dealing with right in hand right now, and that is impermanence. You know, all this is, you know, it's all relative. You know, maybe it sounds coarse to put it in those terms, but, you know, we're food for somebody else. You know, if they put us in the ground, we're going to be worm food, right? You know, so there's all, you know, it opens up so many different permutations of questions with this. So I don't have any of the answers. You know, all I can do is just echo a few of the points that I've heard. You know, but I think this prayer is very good, page 13. And the last part of it, the last stanza, it says, to the animals, insects, and others who suffered for our benefit in order to make this food, we offer our joy and prayers for their liberation from suffering. So it's not only the animals who are suffering, but those, you know, people who take on the jobs of having to process the meat or slaughter the animals and so on. You know, many of them are doing this, you know, I don't want to pretend that they're doing it for some noble reason or something like that. I can't say that. But nevertheless, we have to, for those of us who are meat eaters or harvesters who work in the fields, what about those people that work in the fields picking this stuff for, you know, $1 an hour or whatever it is they make, and the suffering that they go through to do this? Does this justify them? You know, are they not suffering? You know, so it has many different permutations of the way that this can be viewed. So we have to see all this as being impermanent, all being equanimity, all being, you know, all subject to bodhicitta. So, so it's a very provocative question. You know, when we talk about right livelihood, just to make another point about that, because Grant, you know, did call and that was a good idea. And that is that, you know, we talk about policemen. We talk about people that are, you know, working in the prison guards and so on. We talk about soldiers. You know, unfortunately, we need in society to have people like that. And some people are very noble to take those kinds of jobs and carry those jobs out with great nobility. Some don't, you know, but we who do not owe a respect to those who do it nobly and for our benefit. So we have to be aware of that. So there's many different ways, and all this has to be put into a perspective of right view and liberation, how to liberate, you know, all this, you know. So this is all part of that refinement, that purification that we go through. And as we get further and further up, and, you know, so examples of, you know, why many of the great yogis, you know, they're eating very meager meals when they're in their retreats. So there's a lot to this. So anybody else have anything else to say? I don't want to monopolize this any more than I already have done.
I have a lot of different things going on, because one of the things that came up as I was thinking more about this is that, and I don't recall his name, there was a very holy man that was a butcher that was talked about in the some of the stories that were passed on. And it's not that you do this act, it's how you go about the act that creates the karma for you and
Intention.
how you live with it.
Yeah, what intention is a big part, yes.
Yeah. So even the most obscure act needs to be, not needs to be, is registered. So, we just have to figure out a way that we pay back for our ignorance when we don't know beforehand, and our once we understand and once we have the complete thoughts, then we have to discover how we can pay back for the things that we've done for so many years that we haven't. It's an embarrassment, some of the things that I can recall before I got involved in the Buddhism and the spirituality portions of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Excuse me for moving on, but it's getting late. So thank you. Yes. So I know William very heartfelt about this topic. So as many of you are, as we all can be. So thank you all for your thoughts about this, your comments about this, and this has to go into your contemplations. This is part of your contemplations. This is part of the equanimity. So I think that's what William was just expressing. Okay, so unless there's something that somebody really wants to say, we should do our dedication prayers and for tonight. So Bhavani, if you will, please, if you'll do our dedication prayers on page 18.
Certainly. Lineage dedication prayer. Dorje Chang, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharma Lord Gampopa, Pagma Drupa, and Lord Drinkumpa, please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessings of all the Kagyu Lamas. By this virtue may I achieve the all-knowing state, and may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn may it arise, where it is born may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samattabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings. By the blessing of the Buddha who attained the 3 kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. Dekorma prayer. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, May I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Drikupa Ratnashri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, Master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Dedication prayer by Lord Jington Sumgun. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate root of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily, and the great luminosity of the mind is such, and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones.
Very good. Thank you. That was very good. Thank you, everybody. Good conversation tonight.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Well,
Thank you.
Say-
Good night.
we'll see
Thank you.
Good
Good night.
Good night, friends.